It's time for the final word in sports all across the state. You're listening to Sports Talk with your hosts, Bill Kornblut, Will Pelagic, and the Professor Tom Hayes. You've been waiting all day, so join the show now by calling 800-956-7266.
And a pleasant good afternoon and evening to you and yours, and welcome into Sports Talk, South Carolina Radio Network on a Monday, the 10th day of September 2018. along with Professor Tom Hayes, yours truly, Will Pelagic, and producer Brian Leonard. Phil Kornblut not with us today, celebrating Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish holiday. He'll be back with us tomorrow on Talking Tuesday, but we want to get plenty of reaction from you today, as we normally do on a Monday. 800-956-7266. Opening hour is open for your calls. We also have a special thing. We're doing a special contest in the opening hour that we are debuting here on Mondays. So involves your audience participation. So if you get on the line, you have a chance to be a part of that coming up here later on this hour. Again, 800-956-7266. Comments as well on Twitter at SportsTalkSC, as well as on our Periscope at SportsTalkSC, where you can catch our video feed. You can also do so at SportsTalkSC.com. Before we get to the particulars, what happened on Saturday, we do want to at least echo the thoughts from not only our governor, but also the folks who are in law enforcement and emergency preparation about the impending hurricane that is coming along the at least South Carolina, North Carolina, and Virginia coastlines. Hurricane Florence is a serious storm, folks, and if you're in the evacuation zones, either in the Charleston Low Country or up in Horry County in Myrtle Beach, we certainly urge you to take the preparations necessary for that storm. And again, the evacuations that will be taking place over the course of the next couple of hours and days. And certainly we wish the best of you, at least making sure that you are diligent, vigilant, and of course, most importantly, smart and safe as this weather event comes across. We have not heard anything yet from either South Carolina or USC, or Clemson rather, about plans for Saturday changing as far as those games are concerned. I know we've talked a little bit behind some of our back channel people at USC just because it is closer to the coastline than Clemson is. Even though classes are canceled tomorrow at USC, they still plan on having practices as long as it is okay for them to drive, and they're still on target for games this weekend, with South Carolina playing Marshall and Clemson playing Georgia Southern. However, last Saturday, a much different story. Weather not necessarily an issue with South Carolina, but the rainfall was again in the form of points, Pro, and South Carolina found themselves on a wrong end of a lopsided result, and really a situation where you can't look at it any other way other than it was disappointing and not what we expected from this Gamecock squad, which had showed some promise through the opening week, although against albeit different competition.
Yeah, people will say, in my opinion, looking at the game and looking at the players before the game, you would say from an emotional standpoint, South Carolina was ready to play. Mm-hmm. From an execution standpoint, they were not. Rico Dowdle, uncharacteristically, alligator arms on a couple of passes, drop passes early, not getting any points out of an interception when you scored a touchdown. The incredible non-hustle, in my opinion, when Georgia intercepted that tip pass early in the football game that spotted them a touchdown, where Baker laid the ball down at the half-yard line, and it took 20 seconds, I believe, for a Georgia player to pick it up and take it in the end zone because nobody noticed that the official really hadn't given a signal for a touchdown.
Exactly.
And if somebody else had been there, they picked it up. But you can't make mistakes against a team like Georgia. If you make mistakes, you're gonna hand them the victory, and South Carolina pretty much did that in the first half.
And it's obvious. And before I get back to the USC, I do want to at least put this out, just because this happened within the last couple of hours. As far as we were talking about the weather earlier, Coastal Carolina has moved its game that was scheduled for this weekend. They're going to play actually on Wednesday against Campbell. They were supposed to host Campbell at Brooks Stadium coming up this weekend, but instead they've moved that game to Boys Creek, North Carolina. They're going to play it on Wednesday at 2 o'clock. They're offering free admission for those who possibly are in that area of coastal persuasion. You can go see that game. But just back to Carolina and Georgia, it seemed, and I watched the game in real time, and then I watched it twice more afterwards just to kind of see if really the score indicated just separation between the two teams. And the thing that I found most troubling, Pro, is that this was a team that went in last year at Georgia and entered the fourth quarter down 10 points. Mm-hmm. And I know there was heat, and I know that there were other extenuating circumstances in the game as far as emotions, but I found it very, very hard to believe and really out of character that it seemed like in the second half, South Carolina just didn't have enough, whether it was the depth, whether it was execution, or whether it was just a lack of belief. I'm not trying to sit here and say that South Carolina quit, but that looked like a group that seemed defeated after those first 2 scores in the third quarter.
I will say this. I don't think it's as much as South Carolina quit as much as Georgia said, look, they don't want it, and they gave away some points in the first half.
Right.
We get the kickoff in the second half.
They took charge.
We take the kickoff down, and everybody can tell you even that your game plan is still in the works if you're 2 scores down. If you fall 3 scores down, now you got to tear some pages out of the playbook. And here's the key. Georgia went right down there and got that third score, and then it was all she wrote.
Yes.
Because South Carolina was one-dimensional, throwing the football, and Georgia was ready for that.
800-956-7266. We're going to bank some of your phone calls and get you right in here on Sports Talk. I do want to at least touch on the game that took place at Texas on Saturday. Clemson and Texas A&M. Listen, I will sit here and say I wasn't really shocked by the Georgia result because I knew that Georgia had the talent ability to come in and, I don't want to say house South Carolina, but make it a non-competitive game. That didn't shock me. I probably was the only one in the room I think it was the only one in the room who took Georgia between you,
I took
Corn.
Georgia, but I thought it would be a 7 to 4 point game.
Okay. But the fact of the matter is, I don't want to sit here and say I was right because I wasn't calling a blowout, but at the same time, I'm not shocked by what happened. So at that point, and again, from that standpoint, it has nothing to do with South Carolina. I think that game told us more about Georgia than it did about South Carolina. Conversely, we learned more about Texas A&M than we did about Clemson. We learned that Clemson's secondary concerns are real. We learned that the front four can't win a game all by themselves. And I think we also learned that from the quarterback standpoint, neither one of them is a complete quarterback right now. And I think that's part of the reason why Kelly Bryant and Trevor Lawrence have not, quote-unquote, separated, because while Trevor has the tools, he doesn't have the experience. And while Kelly Bryant has the experience, he doesn't always have the tools or the correct decision-making. He was poised in that second half, but there were issues in that first half that led to Trevor playing more.
Well, if I'm Jimbo Fisher, this is what scares me, because I saw Texas A&M look like a team that this was their Super Bowl, and it will be interesting to see what their emotion level is like in their next game. They were flying around. Their receivers had Velcro hands. I mean, they were making some spectacular catches.
Everything.
And if you would have told me at the beginning of this game that Clemson would give up over 500 yards in total offense, I'd call you a fool.
You would have thought they would have lost, too, from that perspective.
I was shocked. And
here's the thing. The other part of this, too, I don't think anybody expected the best quarterback on the field to be Kellen Mond. And I think Kellen Mond showed the growth of the offseason that we've been hearing about from people in Texas A&M persuasion and from Jimbo Fisher. This is a team that, October 13th officially scares me now, if you're South Carolina. I even think October 6th officially scares you, depending on how you play against Vanderbilt and Kentucky.
The way you played against Georgia, you may have some deep concern for Marshall as well.
Well, it's true.
So you got to watch.
Well, I don't think that the team we saw on Saturday with South Carolina is the real South Carolina. I just think that Georgia can make any team look very bad.
Yeah, and it almost looks. Georgia did to South Carolina what Auburn did to Georgia last year.
True.
Late. They made Georgia look bad, and you thought, wait a minute, Georgia's not that bad. And so that's one of the one days at the office when they got scuttled in the first half and then got stepped on in the second half.
We have some people on South Carolina's side who are saying that they might only win 3 more games this season. I don't think that's the case. We want to hear your thoughts next. 800-956-7266. A full batch of phones coming up here on Sports Talk, South Carolina Radio Network.
Sports Talk is the sports talk show of Main Street, South Carolina. From the coast to the mountains, we cover it all.
Just got this from the folks at USC. They're kind of tinkering around with their media plans for tomorrow. Basically, their player availability is going to basically push their practice back an hour because of the fact that the university is closed. And again, that kind of jives with what we were hearing about from the university when it comes to whether or not they were going to keep the campus open but still have practice, these kind of things. So they still are going to practice. 800-956-7266, 800-956-7266, he said surreptitiously. Before I get to the calls, I do want to add one more point. They got to figure out how to get a big win at home, South Carolina.
Yes.
Because this is ridiculous now. This is how many times in a row under Muschamp? This is twice, at least, with the Kentucky game. You could help me out if there was another in 15 or in 16, rather. Was there a game of this magnitude played in 16 by the time they got to the end of the year, or no? I don't think there was. But the fact of the matter is that this is twice in a row now. You have basically put all your eggs in the basket around your conference home opener, and twice in a row you've laid a proverbial egg. And here's the thing. It literally looks like the same story. Jake Bentley, too hot to come through to start the game with the, sailing passes and throwing a screen pass 100 miles an hour at somebody's hands. Granted, the drops were on the receivers. The drops were definitely on the receivers. Yeah. But at the same point in time, he's oversailing guys. He's throwing behind receivers. I mean, I'm just I know we've been told that all this stuff had been corrected. That's my point with Jake Bentley.
Well, the thing you got to
it's not all on him. Everybody's.
The point is, it's funny how everything is on Jake Bentley, and it's not only on him. I think probably one of the keys that I don't like is shooing the running game. Anybody that runs the football, and Georgia will tell you, because in the game early they were getting stuffed. But what did they do? You keep banging on the wall just like a wrecking ball till it gives. And South Carolina did not, show that they were serious about the running game, to the fact that Georgia wasn't even playing the running game.
Georgia ran the ball 52 times for 271 yards. South Carolina 20 times, 54 yards.
The only other thing is, always I tell people, if a team has a good defense, and they're usually well prepared, and they will be well prepared with Coach Smart, is you give them a pop quiz. They've been working on Debo all week. Pop quiz. I'm sorry, I know it's hot, Debo, but you're in great shape. You're going to have to go in motion on every down. We got to have some window dressing. That's what the coaches should tell their players.
And they said it on the broadcast. Anytime Debo went in motion, he got the football, so they were prepared for it.
Exactly. But what I'm saying is, you keep him in motion so they don't know when he's going to get it, and sometimes when you see him moving in that direction, then you go to the opposite side of the field. So, now it did work on the option pass when Debo threw it exactly what you should do when you're not a quarterback, is just float it up there when you see the guys wide open, and it works. So as I said, decoy, sometimes you got to use your best player as a decoy.
800-956-7266. Do you believe that your expectations have changed for South Carolina? Is the talent gap widening? And if you're a Clemson fan right now, do you feel like a bandit that got out of the back door with something, and you feel like you are at least okay going into this weak part of the schedule, but still concerned about when the competition ends up stepping up? Let's go to Delvin in Fountain End. Delvin, you're on Sports Talk. You're first up here on a Monday. What's up?
Hey, guys. How y'all doing?
What's happening?
Oh, I'm going great. First of all, Clemson, I think we talked about the young secondary. If you play against a good quarterback, you get exposed. And don't forget, Kellen Mond kept a lot of players alive by escaping the pressure and was allowed to expose their secondary in the backfield. So that was good on him, and good game plan for Jimbo Fisher in the second half. As far as South Carolina, they looked like they just got out physical on the offensive line and the defensive line. I mean, it was unbelievable how the way Georgia ran the ball against them, and South Carolina couldn't even run the ball. It was unbelievable. They came out past it. I agree with Pro. They came out past it. I think you should establish a run first and then open up the passing game.
Well, a lot of people were angry about that after the game, going out with the run to start. I didn't have a problem with it philosophically, but I think you at least had to be malleable. I think that's the part of it that they didn't understand, is that they almost kind of tipped their hand that way by how much they passed it early.
Yeah.
Would you say that was probably the case?
Yeah, I agree with you about that. They took their hand a little bit, but you got to give it to Georgia, man. They came out there. They was able to counter that, and man, they were just running the ball. I mean, they off a slant. They were just throwing running back out there. It was unbelievable. They had like 50 running backs.
Exactly. That's here's the thing. I appreciate the call, Delvin, and we'll take more of your calls. 800-956-7266 as we go throughout the program. I know you didn't. You kind of were dismissive about the recruiting point, but it goes back to what I said beforehand. Everybody, any player that they've wanted over the last 2 years, they've gotten. Anybody they've wanted, they've gotten. And if they go head to head with a school on a player, they get him. There's a reason why. Because either what they're doing is good or their players are good. And, from that standpoint, you're looking at a scenario where they've built a program and they've built a philosophy and a scheme that fits them, and they've got the guys to be able to run that scheme effectively.
Exactly. And really, when you're playing a football game, the talent level gives you the upper hand. It doesn't say that you're going to win games. We've seen teams that have superior talent and didn't win. If superior talent always wins out, Georgia would have more Eastern Division titles. If superior talent won out all the time, Missouri wouldn't have won those 2 Eastern crowns because they did not have the best talent. In the East, Florida and Georgia will perennially have that type of talent.
Well, you mentioned the depth on the lines of scrimmage. South Carolina took some depth on both sides of the football. This is Will Muschamp's teleconference last night.
Ligament inside his ankle, and he'll be about a month. We couldn't detect the tear on the first MRI because of the swelling. We did a re-MRI on Friday and saw a tear in that ligament, so they think he'll be about a month. And Javon Gwynn had surgery on his foot as a non-football issue. That's something that had been bothering him. Actually had a similar injury in high school that we needed to fix, and we went ahead and fixed it, and he will be out for the season. So,
Will, Dave again. Looking at DJ's absence, who will you look at besides Daniel Fennell to kind of fill that spot?
Well, at the buck position, you got Bryson Allen Williams, Danny Fennell, and Brad Johnson are all very capable guys. At the end position, Aaron Sterling, Shameik Blackshear, and Nakeer Thomas can bump outside and play as well. So we'll look at some different combinations of guys that give us the best opportunity to win the game.
And also, Will, I think I saw a few 3-man fronts yesterday. Will that be a bigger option going forward?
Well, it's always been with DJ because he can play in space and do some of the things that that we want to do, and that was something going into that game from the summer was obviously having DJ and Bryson on the edges to help us with some of the quick screens and things to set better edges on our defense. So that's that's unfortunate, but it is what it is.
That's Will Muschamp last night at his teleconference. DJ won him out a month with the ligament damage, the tear that took place in his ankle in the game against Coastal Carolina. He was held out of the game going into Georgia despite all the coaching staff being optimistic about that going in. And as you heard Will Muschamp say, the tear was not initially seen on the first MRI because all the swelling basically covered it up, which is typical. But again, I think you and I were both very surprised about the optimism about his injury going into the week based on the way it looked in game time.
Yeah, fans, now you see that carrying rabbit's feet around doesn't work because that's what I felt that the coaches thought there was a hope, please. But when a guy goes down and it's not because of contact, you worry about things like that. I don't know why, but I wasn't a big football player. You could tell about 145 pounds I am. I didn't play football, but I have had torn ligaments in the ankle, and I know how that can be painful, and you can't move. And so it's a detriment. But as he says, they have enough reinforcements, I thought, not of Wanham's caliber, but guys who can play steady football. And I think they played pretty well in his stead.
You know what I want to hear? I want to hear a Gamecock fan who's ticked off. 800-956-7266. I want to hear a Gamecock fan who's ticked off. I want to hear a Clemson fan that's concerned. Do we have anyone out there who's that way? Because I feel like if you're not concerned, if you're a Gamecock fan, you're kind of foolish right now. Welcome back, Sports Talk South Carolina Radio Network. We have a lot of our second hour staples as per usual on a Monday. We'll have our first and 10 with Zach Willis coming up at the top of the hour. We'll talk about Clemson and South Carolina in great detail with him. David Shelton of the Charleston Post and Courier will join us to go over the high school slate from last Friday and also any changes that might happen because of the weather upcoming with Hurricane Florence that are already in place from the High School Sports Report. And Mick Mixon talking about a big win for the Panthers. You know, I was driving down on I-77 coming back from the Charlotte airport after flying in from Texas A&M. A lot of stars while the game was still going on, that were going southward on I-77. A lot of people with stars on their cars going south. So there were some pretty ticked off Cowboy fans going in there.
Well, they were ticked off, but if I was the Panthers,
you wouldn't feel off of that. You wouldn't feel all that good.
The Panthers years ago would have just drubbed Dallas the way Dallas was playing.
Dallas
I said,
terrible.
well, is this? My mind was saying, is this a rerun of an exhibition game, or is this the real thing?
There were a lot of games on Sunday that looked like that. We'll talk about that with Nick Mixon coming up here near the end of the program. 800-956-7266. I've yet to see some fire today, but I have a feeling our next caller is going to give us some fire. And with that, we're going to try something a little different that we'll be doing here on Mondays the rest of the year.
It's time for the Terminix Best Fan or Pest Fan of the Week. For over 70 years, Terminix has helped Carolina fans protect what they love about living in the South, from football Saturdays to Sunday brunch.
The Best or Pest Fan Contest is now on Sports Talk. This will be something we do every Monday. Again, Terminix, with more than 300 branches in South Carolina, Terminix is always there to help with what bugs you. So we have 3 questions that we'll use here that basically deal with both Clemson and South Carolina's games this weekend. And we want to find out whether you are the best fan or the pest fan. The 3 questions, we'll start with Tom, who is in Charleston, who is a Clemson fan. Tom, first, I will allow you to make the point that you called to at least talk to us about it, and then I'm going to ask you these 3 questions. So give us your thoughts on what happened with Clemson so far, or at least we thought we had Tom. At least we did. Let's try and find our second line here. We had our second line pop up as well here. We want to get a couple of guys in here to try and make this play itself out. Vince is calling in Charleston. Vince, how are you? Vince, what kind of fan are you?
I am a Gamecock fan that is kicked off.
You are a Gamecock fan. Okay, so what did you think about the game on Saturday?
I thought it was a very poor showing. Everybody keeps saying Jake Bentley needs to step up to the plate and own the team. I don't feel like he's done that this week, but I don't blame him 100%. I'm sorry I'm late into the show. I don't know if y'all address this, but on 4th down and 6 at midfield to go for it, and 4th down and 6 at the 10-yard line to score, why did we not go for it? I do not understand. And that has really been in my crawl
all weekend.
Well, but let's face it now. It was early in the football game, and that field goal brought it to 17-10. You don't want to give Georgia, a 10-point lead if you don't make it. So I think it was the time was not the right time. This has been the 4th quarter. You go for it. 2nd quarter, you don't go for it.
All right, so Vince, we want to try and find out whether you are the best or pest fan. So I'm going to ask you a couple of questions here to see whether or not you paid attention this weekend with both of these games. First question is, which player contributed in the Clemson and A&M game and the South Carolina-Georgia game? Looking at both of those games, which player contributed the most yards of offense between those 2 games on Saturday?
Between the 2, A.J. Turner for South Carolina, I would hope. That's correct.
Is not correct for A.J. Turner of South Carolina. You we're looking at the wrong game between those 2, between Clemson and A&M and South Carolina and Georgia. It has something to do with the quarterback at Texas A&M. That's just that's my point there. But thank you so much, Tom. I guess Tom is a pest fan this week from the folks at Terminix here. We'll take more of those if we get them. 800-956-7266 is the number here on Sports Talk. Again, thanks to Terminix for sponsoring that. It's weird. People, I would say that the problem was not the decision-making. The problem was the lack of ingenuity offensively for South Carolina.
Yeah, and the key point is, this is why that when I watch 2 teams, in my opinion, and this is just my opinion, that there's no difference in a close game than a blowout. If you're Georgia, Why would I let you stay in the game and you can steal it from me?
Right.
If I got a chance to maul you, I'm going to do it. And that's what Georgia did. They felt they had the chance. They told South Carolina, look, you played us tough in the first half, but you didn't take advantage of the opportunities you have. It's time for us to come out here in the second half and take it. And that's exactly what they did.
Now, on Clemson's side, there are some definite concerns. And the one thing that, and I really tried to figure out the best way to word this when I was there on Saturday, and I really couldn't. It was not a forum to be able to at least voice this concern. But you saw the danger of what happens when you have a 2-quarterback system and you try to implement it in a game that is firmly in the balance. And I don't really know if either of those guys graded out, quote unquote, a winner. Because despite the fact that Kelly Bryant had those 2 third-quarter touchdown drives, they really didn't do much offensively after that. And after the first throw from Trevor Lawrence to T. Higgins, which was a remarkable throw and a remarkable play on the other end by Higgins, he threw it only where Higgins could get it. But after that, Trevor really was not heard from, at least from the standpoint of whether or not they actually did anything with the offense.
This is why you recruit. Had it been anybody else but T. Higgins, well, first of all, if you didn't know football and you saw T. Higgins, you would swear if you pulled the uniform off, there was an S on his chest.
Yes.
Because not many people can make that play.
No one
because
can.
he was under duress. The guy had perfect coverage on him, and it contacted him, and he just went over the top. And the guy still had a chance to swat it away, and he held on.
And then he used the whole rest of the field to run away from him, which was so amazing for a guy who's only a sophomore to be able to have that kind of presence of mind to be able to do that.
And of course, here's where we say that teams trying to beat a highly ranked team, guys, don't try to be Superman. Texas A&M, they're at the 3-yard line. The guy tries to dive, and that's what cost him when that ball got tipped from behind. And it was called out of bounds. I don't think it went into the end zone.
Remember the Wes Welker looking like receiver from Mizzou by the name of TJ Moe?
Yeah.
He's a good friend, and I follow him on Twitter. He not only played for a guy in Gary Pinkel who basically taught you do not stretch out the ball in the end zone. He also played for a guy in the National Football League who's had that same philosophy. It's Bill Belichick. And there's a reason why those guys teach you, hey, you are not allowed. You were not allowed to stretch the football out toward the end zone because of that exact play. It is the worst rule. The worst rule in all of sports is that rule, is the fact that if you fumble it out of the back of the end zone, it's a touchback. It's the worst rule. It is penal for an offense, and it unjustifiably rewards a defense. In my mind, the ball should be out at the 1 if it goes out of the back of the end zone.
Well,
in that scenario.
Just looking at it real time from the television, and then looking at it again, this is why I don't like the replay where you take the impetus from the official's call, because first of all, the official was in the wrong
position. Yes.
And to him, he thought the ball went into the plane inside the pylon. It was clear that it was not inside the pylon. And so because none of the video showed conclusively, they had to go with the official's call. And I thought it was just a horrible call. But that shows you how even when you're a great team, you got to have some luck on your side, because if Texas A&M takes that touchdown in and still has time, Clemson may have lost that game.
Certainly, it was hard to tell in real time, and even by the replays, whether that call was correct or not. But at the same point in time, if it's taught differently, that play didn't happen.
The guys are always checking email. Send your comments or questions to talkback@sportstalksc.com. Now, more of Sports Talk from Columbia's Main Street.
Sports Talk, South Carolina Radio Network, here on a Monday, 10th day of September 2018, as we continue here on a Monday. 800-956-7266 is the phone number. We got Zach Willis coming up at the top of the hour, the coach, who will give us first and 10 with both Clemson and South Carolina. David Shelton, Charleston Post and Courier, as well as Mick Mixon, voice of the Panthers. Did you think the game on Saturday, from South Carolina's perspective, was called fairly on the lines of scrimmage? Do you think that South Carolina, or at least Georgia, got away with some holds? Because we had a listener on our Twitter account at SportsTalkSC tweeting about that.
If they don't call it, it ain't holding. Now, here's the deal. I've always said they don't call holding in the SEC.
No.
Anyway, Jadeveon Clowney, you can count on one hand how many times Jadeveon Clowney, for instance, a flag was thrown on the offensive line for people holding him. But somehow I saw him readjusting his jersey on every snap.
800-956-7266. Let's go to Gary, who's calling in Spartanburg. Gary, you're on Sports Talk. How are you?
I'm doing great, Pro and Will. I wanted to kind of comment on what you were talking about, Will. And I agree with you. I think that's the worst. One of the worst rules is kind of up there, maybe in the top three, with, losing possession of the ball just because it goes out of the back of the end zone. I think if you went down right there on the one, you didn't quite cross the goal line, place the ball back on the 1 yard line where it was fumbled.
Right.
Team takes possession, right? The team
or just
right
place
there.
Place it at the spot of the fumble. Let's place it at the spot of the fumble. That's where you got to place it.
Exactly.
Because then you're going to have because then you're going to have people throwing it through the back of the end zone from the 5 yard line.
What the holy roller rule?
Yeah, you're going to see the Dave Casper thing.
Yeah.
Gary, Gary, you seem. Go ahead.
Well, my question also was, going back to the South Carolina Georgia debacle. I keep hearing about guys that step up and take another guy's place when he's hurt. And the one name I heard that I'm not familiar with is the Danny Fennell guy.
Right.
Is he a South Carolina kid?
He's from Georgia.
He's from Georgia. He was basically the guy who is in there when they want to play Bryson Allen Williams on the line. Basically, he's the guy who kind of comes in when they want to have Bryson go in and be a pass rusher. He comes in and plays that hybrid nickel linebacker position when Bryson's up on the line.
And Bryson and Fennell had some solid games toward the end of last year. In fact, he was one of the stellar guys down the stretch in the Michigan game.
So he's just kind of one of these placeholder guys who they'll have to deal with here. If you look at the next month, Marshall, Vandy, Kentucky, Missouri, that basically takes us to a month from now. Basically, in my mind, maybe A&M is a target date for them, but if anything, I would say conservatively, maybe after the bye week in Tennessee. So, I mean, again, that's just given the timetable that they're telling us. Do you want to play our best or pest fan game, Gary, or are you in a hurry? You want to? All right, so
I'll play.
You'll play. So I asked this question earlier. Which player contributed the most yards on offense in the 2 games involving Clemson and South Carolina on Saturday?
I would say the young man, the receiver from Conway. His name escapes me right now.
No, he's actually an answer to one of my later questions. But I'll go ahead and ask you the question that was basically him. He caught the most passes between South Carolina and Clemson receivers on Saturday, so that is one of his. I'll give you another one. Of the players who rushed for the most yards Saturday, who rushed for more yards? Kelly Bryant, Travis Etienne, Tyson Williams, or Rico Dowdle? Who out of those 4 rushed for the most yards?
I would say Kelly Bryant.
He did. 15 carries, 54 yards. And the player who contributed the most yards on offense in the 2 games on Saturday was Kellen Mond, the A&M quarterback. So from that perspective. But thank you so much for playing, Gary. You were a good sport. I appreciate it. we'll go ahead and give him the best just because he got 2 right, kind of.
Okay.
That's just the way that that will work. And it's brought to you by Terminix. Terminix, always there to help with what bugs you. 800-956-7266. Let's get one more in before we get to recruiting. Clark in Greenwood, you're on Sports Talk. How are you?
Hey, fellas, how you doing?
What's up?
I'm a big Clemson fan. I was, I've been on the Trevor Lawrence bandwagon too. I mean, I will admit it, but it just seemed like Saturday night the offense was clicking a little better with Kelly Bryant, and but I was just I was wanting to ask you and pros what y'all thought about the play calling that Clemson had in the third quarter. I wasn't
uninspired.
I wasn't really impressed.
Uninspired.
I wasn't really impressed with it. Yes, exactly.
Very uninspired.
I mean, you throw it. Yeah, I mean, I don't understand you, and nothing against Tavian Feaster, but I felt like Lynn Dixon should have got in there and got a couple carries.
Yeah, Lynn J. Dixon didn't touch the field, and I really think that that's operator error on Clemson. And again, you can see a difference in the play calling between where Kelly Bryant is and where Trevor Lawrence is. In my mind, if you're wanting to do this, don't do this half. You know what?
But here's the deal.
Don't do it half donkey.
This is where the defense can affect the offensive play calling.
True.
Dabo thought, wait a minute, you know what? Our secondary is getting drilled. We might want to run some clock in this. So,
but you got to get push.
When people say there's a difference on offensive execution and defense, and sometimes that play calling is adjusted if your defense isn't stopping anybody. And I think Dabo said, look, let's run some clock in this quarter and see if we can get the ball.
Again, I wasn't inspired by the play calling while Trevor was in there, and I think again they played ultra conservative.
Yes.
After they scored that 4th touchdown, they played ultra conservative because they were trying to play a little keep away. The problem is there are issues with running the football with guys not named Kelly Bryant. That's still an issue. Like again, I mean, Etienne didn't necessarily have the best game. Feaster did not have the best game. Adam Choice is basically only in there for when they want to block. And we didn't really see Lynn J. Dixon at all. I mean, if Lynn J. Dixon is the second coming, use him. There's too much of this saving of the bullets in my mind. And I feel that they could have been a lot better with the play calling. Corn, again, is out today for Rosh Hashanah, so we'll give you the recruiting report via surrogate here. Offensive lineman Darius Washington in Pensacola, Florida, who has been a Bulldog commitment to Mississippi State since June, still giving USC and Miami a chance to recruit him, and he took an official visit with the Gamecocks this weekend, said he had a good time with his family, a good overall experience, and also that Eric Wolford believes that the offensive line is coming along. That's news to me and news to the offensive line. Defensive lineman Jacquez Sorrells also appeared at USC Saturday, took an unofficial visit. It's his 3rd with the Gamecocks for the former Florida commitment. He is still scheduled for an official this upcoming weekend, though he said Sunday night he's not sure yet about that visit. He said he was able to get his family up there for the first time, which he was happy about. He's still considering LSU, Oregon, Bama, and Florida State. Mikhail Dukes, a First Baptist running back, made a first official visit to East Carolina over the weekend. It was great. He said the game was great. Atmosphere is unbelievable. He'll visit Virginia Tech later on this month at a to-be-determined date. 2020 D lineman Marquise Black of McDonough, Georgia, visited USC Saturday. He said the atmosphere was nice and that he had a good time, and the D-line coach was glad he made it and also plans to visit UCF this weekend. Quavaris Crouch originally was scheduled to go to USC, but instead went to NC State Saturday. Safety Dedrick Holmes of Evans, Georgia, one of the uncommitted 2019 targets for USC Saturday at the Georgia game. Others were Alex Huntley of Hammond, 2020 offensive lineman Seth McLaughlin of Beaufort, Georgia, Devin Curtis of Nashville, 2021 offensive lineman Eli Sutton of Nashville, and linebacker of the 2021 class Damian Wilson of Kings Mountain, North Carolina. Josiah James took his first official visit over the weekend at Tennessee. He'll visit Clemson this weekend and Duke the last weekend of the month. John Butler Jr. of Christ Church, 2021 forward, visited USC Saturday. He was recently offered by Clemson, and Clemson, one of the 4 schools set for in-home visits with New Jersey guard Jalen Gaffney, according to New York-based basketball recruiting reporter Adam Zagoria of Zags Report Online. Check out the recruiting online at SportsTalkSC.com, and on Twitter, use the hashtag STRecruiting. First and 10 with Zach Willis comes your way next. We'll recap everything from Clemson and South Carolina from the weekend.
Round 2 of Sports Talk up next with your hosts Phil Kornbluth, Will Pelagic, and the Professor Tom Hayes. Don't leave us hanging. Join the show, 800-956-7266.
Sports Talk South Carolina Radio Network is hopefully a good evening for you, and hope that, like we said before to start the show, you are diligently prepping for the weather that is coming this week. We're already getting some reports of some gas stations in the Midlands here that already are out of gas, and places that are out of water. So the prep is happening here for Hurricane Florence as we get ready here for that. A lot of high school football changes as well that we'll get to at the bottom of the hour from David Shelton of the Charleston Post and Courier. Mick Mixon later on in the hour to talk about the Panthers. But right now it is first down with 10 yards to go and 10 minutes to talk about South Carolina and Clemson, with both at least having very different weekends, to say the least, Zach. And we'll start with the Gamecocks. I don't want to sit here and say that I was too terribly surprised with the result. I would say I was surprised with the nature of the result, but what are your initial takes from what we saw with the Gamecocks and Bulldogs on Saturday?
Well, you know, the first mistake was hyping that game up the way they chose to do it. Will, you know, Georgia is a machine. And if you didn't believe that from last year, I don't know what it takes. You know, they came out, they got in there and did exactly what they wanted to do anytime they wanted to do it to South Carolina. And it was a completely, it could have been, the score could have been much worse. It was completely dominated.
Would you say that game personified more of a talent gap or more of a scheme, an out-scheming situation?
Both. Number one, you got to understand, you know, we're evaluating right now. When you look at talent, this is the recruiting classes of 3 years ago coming to fruition. So look back at the rankings. I don't know what they were. I never look at them. That's why now you rank the recruiting class of 3 years ago. That's lesson number one. Number two, up front, Georgia absolutely dominated the line of scrimmage on both sides and basically made South Carolina quit in the third quarter, especially on defense. I thought why throw the football to the running back out of the backfield who's caught 11 passes in his career, you know, and drops his first 3-1 for a pick six and continue to do it throughout the game. You know, he's a good running back. He's not a wide receiver, and you've got some pretty doggone good ones, some of the best in the SEC on your team, and you really don't feature them that much in that ball game. You've got to go with your absolute best. You're not going to trick Georgia. They're too good. You got to play them toe-to-toe, and you got to hang on for dear life and fight like your life depends on it just to have a chance against a team that good.
What did you think of the way they came out with all the passing?
Trying to trick people. You know, it's a cheap way to try to get a touchdown, but you can't trick your way through a ball game in the SEC against anybody, much less the University of Georgia. I understand the idea was to throw Georgia off balance. And you know what? It might have worked if they would have caught the ball, but they didn't execute the fundamentals, Will. And that's always a bad thing. But it's a horrific thing against a team that may very well be the best in the country.
Yeah, Zach, you and I well know that when we look at teams, say Missouri when they won the 2 Eastern titles, or perennially a TCU or Boise State, they don't have the talent as a lot of the opposition they play, but they don't shoot themselves in the foot. They don't make mistakes. And that's what you have to do to beat a Georgia. I think from a psychological standpoint, South Carolina had to realize once it was 14-0 and they got the touchdown, when they got the subsequent interception, they've got to take that football in. They can't leave without any points. And I thought from that juncture then, Georgia said, look, we don't think this team wants the game. We're going to have to take it because we're not going to let them stay in the football game, because as long as you let them stay in the game, they may steal it. And it seemed from that point on, Georgia got that 10-point lead just before the half on the long field goal. And you knew they were going to come out with the kickoff in the second half and take it right down the field and say, okay, with 3 scores up, they're out of their game plan. We've got this one.
I think you're dead on the money. When the interception happened, I said, here's the chance. Here's Carolina's chance And at that point, if you're that coaching staff, you got to pull them together. You tell your coordinator, listen, I want your best 4 plays right now. Because what it does, that would have changed the face of that entire game from a psychological standpoint. You've got to make your kids believe. And that's an opportunity to make your kids believe in themselves and believe that they have a chance to win. And it was critical. And I felt like, you know, when they went for it on 4th down with 3:50 to go in the first quarter, there was another situation where it gave UGA a cheap field goal. You can't take chances. You've got to take calculated risk. And when the opposition makes a mistake, it is critical. And let me emphasize, life and death critical as far as football goes, that you capitalize on every mistake they make, because they won't make many.
I guess the last question to ask you, and I know it was hot, Zach, but, you know, I'm going to tell Debo, hey, guy, I know you're in great shape. So guess what? We're going to put you in motion on every down just to have Georgia think about where the window dressing is. And I may not throw to him for 3 or 4 times, but on that 4th time, I may hand it off to him on that sweep, and maybe we do something. But in the meantime, we're going to use you early as a decoy. I know you want to get the ball to your best player, but isn't it kind of cogent for you at some point early in a football game to give a defense a pop quiz by using your best player as a decoy?
Well, I don't think it hurts anything. And I think that's what they were trying to do by going to Dowdle, you know, and him dropping those passes. And at that point, you can't criticize the coach. The kid's dropping the ball. You know, he's hitting him, and Bentley's hitting him in the hands with it. Early on, I thought probably the pass protection was pretty good at times. But it is the things unwound. And I think that's probably was their intent, because as you know, the first touchdown was really well set up. They ran him around. He threw the pass over to Williamson. Touchdown. I thought that was a beautiful call, but things fell apart when that interception, when they did not capitalize. I'll go back to that. Everything they wanted to do fell apart on them right there. And it's just such a fine line when you play a team like Georgia. You know, people can be hard on Carolina all they want to be, but the bottom line is Georgia's way better than they are. And Carolina had a razor-thin margin of error, and they just couldn't walk that tightrope this time.
But Zach,
it's early in the year,
we've
can't walk it.
We've been sold this bill of goods on this offensive line for the better part of 2 years.
Yeah, and I've been telling you.
And I'm sitting here and I'm saying, you know, what has to happen? You know, do they have to keep bringing in more players? Does it have to turn over another full class, you know, in order to get actual players in there that can dominate the line of scrimmage? Because right now I'm looking at the guys who played on Saturday, and I didn't see it happen.
Hey, look here, Will. I told you from day one, first time you guys brought me on this show to do this commentary, they weren't very good up there. They have not improved. Their scheme hadn't improved. And the key is this: they recruit waist benders. And what I mean by this, these guys bend at the waist. They don't have a bend in their knee. They don't have the hip flexion to block elite-level players in the SEC. And they don't place a premium. They hype these kids up when they bring them in. But when I watch them on film, I know what I'm looking at. And they're not guys that are going to block these cats Georgia and Clemson have, or Alabama. You know, they're not going to block them. And the center, you know, center snaps. Pro, what you mentioned last week, the snaps, the center snaps the whole time. What did Georgia do? They put a zero nose, a head-up nose on that kid and made him sweat, and it gave South Carolina a ton of trouble. The timing was thrown off. Bentley actually at one point was reprimanding the center, which I rarely see that kid do. He had calmed way down from last year, but they just don't have the athletes up front, no matter where they're ranked. Their offensive linemen are waist benders for the most part, and go back and look at their pad level, especially in the second half. They're playing high. Georgia's getting underneath them. Anybody from Little League on knows the low man's going to win, and it's no different in the SEC on Saturday afternoon.
We will switch gears to Clemson here in our next segment to talk with Zach Willis. But, yeah, again, it just didn't seem like there was a lot to hope for against elite competition, and they have to really correct things before they take on Marshall. We'll come back with more from Zach on the Clemson side of things. How surprised was he about how A&M hung tough with the Tigers in Texas A&M?
Sports Talk is the sports talk show of Main Street, South Carolina. From the coast to the mountains, we cover it all.
Sports Talk, South Carolina Radio Network. All right, we transition now with Zach Willis, 1st and 10. We transition to the Clemson Tigers game I was at, and I tell you what, Zach, I didn't think that we were going to see much resistance from this A&M group, but they definitely showed me something, and the guy who probably showed me the most was their quarterback, because he's taken a drastic step from this year, or from last year to this year.
We'll never underestimate Jimbo Fisher's ability to develop a quarterback. Kellen Mond and also Kendrick Rogers, a wide receiver. Those cats were incredible in that ball game. Mond fitting the ball in almost the impossible throws, and I mean not once, not twice, but several times in that game, including one critical touchdown where he threw it in between three guys. And, it's lucky if it happens the first time, but when you do it 3 or 4 times, it ain't lucky anymore. And Texas A&M, my hat's off to them. I will say, Will, what do you think of that atmosphere down there?
I've been before. I love. It's one of my favorite places to watch a college football game. The fans are on top of you. The students, yep. They do a creative thing with the students. They put them up a deck so that you can hear them showering onto you, and the press box shakes when they do the Aggie War Hymn.
And the stands go straight up,
and they show up. I mean, that's the thing. They'll show up for anybody, not just Clemson. And it's a fantastic atmosphere. I don't know about you, but I was at both games, and the way that Clemson secondary played was shades of that game against another team that wears orange. And you know exactly which one I'm talking about from last year on a Friday night, where I saw some of the same busted coverages with Tanner Muse in the back end that I saw last year against Syracuse.
I don't know where his head was. I think he's out there for his mental understanding of the game. He's the Hunter Renfro of the defense. And I was just literally watching. He's staring in the backfield, not reading his keys. And I think they discussed this a little bit. The coaches discussed it right after the game, from what I understand. But he's a too deep safety. He's flat foot reading, not bailing, backpedaling, whatever words you want to use, and getting depth. He's letting tight ends get behind him. Linebackers not walling off tight ends or running backs versus a too deep zone where the middle of the field is your vulnerability if you don't contact those inside receivers. And it hurt them bad and almost cost them the ball game.
Yeah, I mean, they had guys getting behind. That was one thing. I'm glad you brought this up. They had guys getting behind their – you're not supposed to let anybody behind you, last I checked.
Look here. We're talking about two different programs. Clemson is one of the top 4 programs in the country.
Yes.
Whether you like it, you don't like it, that's not my concern. It's a fact. And they underachieved in this ballgame. Now, I will say this. They won that game, okay? And that's what great teams do. They were in an incredibly hostile environment. And I wish we could replicate that up in Columbia, because it helped that ball club up there. Those cats don't walk out when their team gets down. They get louder, and they get more into it. And that's just the spirit of who they are. But you've got to take your hat off to A&M. They gave Clemson all they wanted and more.
Zach, when you have a dominant defensive line like Clemson has, it almost feels that, the secondary, the linebackers, take it for granted that they can freelance back there because these guys usually get pressure. But when you have a quarterback that can get out of the pocket, can run, but have the ability to quickly set his feet and find somebody, that could be to their detriment, not just in this game Saturday, but going forward.
Well, anytime a quarterback can extend the play, and that's what we're talking about here, he's going to get past the first level, which is arguably one of the best defensive lines in college football, and get into your secondary, and by time, any defense is vulnerable. But Clemson, they lost a really good linebacker, O'Daniel. When he left, he meant a lot to that team. People don't realize how good he was. And although Clemson is extremely talented back there, they lack discipline Saturday night, and that's what you saw. And now I will say this, there were some holding calls. A&M's guards were tackling Clemson's defensive tackles in the fourth quarter, and it wasn't getting called. It got called in the 2-point conversion. The ACC officials finally decided they'd bail them out, and I'll give them that. But at the end of the day, that has nothing to do with the secondary play and the back end. Exactly right. It was just like the Syracuse game, except they escaped this time, and we've got to see the Tigers bounce back big, which they usually do, as you know.
Yeah, there'll be a pound of flesh in person of Georgia Southern when they arrive at Death Valley in this upcoming week. And that should be, I think, an opportunity for them to kind of take some frustration out. I want to ask you this from the standpoint of where their quarterback situation is, because I know we saw the experience of Bryant showcased in that second half and the way that they played and the way they played conservatively. But I thought the play calling was different for Bryant and Trevor, and it just showcases just how dangerous, in my mind, it is when you're going back and forth between these guys, because I know they're not running the same plays with both these guys.
There's no question. I thought the same thing. Kelly runs the ball. He's a runner. I know they talk about Lawrence kid being a good runner. Lawrence kid is an incredible passer and going to light up college football if he continues to develop. But they're going to have to, in my opinion, hitch their horse to one wagon. Now, it won't be this week because it's Georgia Southern, but at some point, they're going to have to make a decision. And Kelly Bryant was rock solid. He's not flashy. He's not a rock star type quarterback, but he wins for you, and he has won some huge games for them. And let me say this. This was as big a win as they've had because they had everything go wrong. And they had a hostile environment that they were in, and they were going against a really well-coached, highly motivated football team. And it was a big win for them. It was ugly. There's a ton of things to correct, but at the end of the day, guess what? It's a W.
Now, when Mon started to hit those passes, and we get into the third quarter, and really it looked like Clemson was a little bit vanilla with their play calling. They're normally very aggressive at some point during a series. Do you think that was a byproduct of Dabo saying, wait a minute, my secondary isn't stopping anybody. We better run some clock while we got the lead?
I've just seen since they won the national championship, if they think they're better than you are, especially with their defense, they're going to rely on them, and they're going to try exactly what South Carolina didn't do. They're not going to beat themselves. They may come within a hair, but they understand at the end of the day, if whether it's 1 point or it's 20 points, a win's a win. And he's smart in the fact he was not going to take any undue chances with Kelly Bryant throwing the ball deep, taking unnecessary chances with him running the ball too much and getting beat up, because he can tell now the young fella is not ready for that stage quite yet. The experience is there. They're going to sink or swim on that defense, and I got to believe those defensive backs and those linebackers are really going to have a rough week of practice, because Clemson is built, as much as they talk about their offense, they're building their defense and their special teams, and that's why they're champions.
Well, they're built on their defense because they're paying the defensive coordinator $2.5 million. That's why they're built on their defense.
And he won't have a voice.
Baby.
He just lost his voice today at practice.
Real quick, we got about a minute, Zach. Does this game concern you for when they get to, say, end of the season, ACC championship, state championship weekend, and possible playoffs?
No, it makes them better. It helps them. They passed a huge test. They didn't play their best, but they found a way to win, and that's what winners do. Now, you build on that, and you rip their rear end in practice. The film room should have been a bloodbath yesterday, and these are great coachable moments, and that big ego that team's got, if they were overconfident before, that's gone now. Dabo's got exactly what he wanted. He got on that plane grinning because he's like, I'm going to wear them out this week and treat it like a loss, even though they're 2-0.
This is why I love Zach Willis. He just takes you inside the locker room, takes you inside the psyche of the coaching staff, and also gives you the exact reasoning why things happened in the game. 1st and 10 is always my favorite part of the week. Thank you so much, Zach. We'll talk to you next week after the Georgia Southern and Marshall games.
My pleasure, guys.
We will switch gears to high school football and check in with David Shelton of the High School Sports Report when we come back on Sports Talk. Welcome back, Sports Talk South Carolina Radio Network, as we now move to the high school portion of the program. But before that, I wanted to at least point out the games for next week have been placed for South Carolina and Clemson. South Carolina Vandy taking place at 4 o'clock. It'll be on the SEC network a week from Saturday. And the Clemson road opener at Georgia Tech on September the 22nd will be a 3:30 kick in Atlanta. That'll be seen on either ABC or ESPN. I'll make the designation after this weekend's games. Right now, we head to the high school sports report. Charleston Post and Courier's David Shelton, who joins us in his usual spot on Monday evening. David, what were your impressions of the week that was in high school football?
Well, it's pretty generic week. Wasn't a whole lot of eye-popping upsets, which is kind of the norm. You maybe get one or two a week, but all the top teams are still just playing exceptionally well. The South Points, the Abbeville's. That Abbeville Southside Christian game was what we thought it was going to be. We thought it was going to be a high-scoring, back-and-forth type game. Abbeville ended up winning by I think 44-36 or something like that. But that was the most entertaining game of the week, and I hope at least from the Midlands down that everybody got a good taste, because it might be a while before they see another one.
Well, was the Fort Dorchester-Wando game as close as you thought it would have been?
Well, I mean, I knew, and I said that Wando had a really good defense, but they can't score, and a problem for them. Their quarterback got hurt. They don't have a running game, and if you can't score with Fort Dorchester, you're not going to win. And they battled them extremely tough, and they competed, but Fort still had over 400 yards in offense, and it's not like they got shut down. They committed some things themselves, turnovers, and got stopped on downs and that kind of thing to keep close. But it was a 2-touchdown spread with the tack-on touchdown at the end. But Wando's defense is going to be able to play with anybody. The problem is they're having trouble scoring points.
You're staying in your neck of the woods. Somerville had their way with Stratford. I think it was about 56-17. Is Somerville back or getting close to where they were, threatening to win a state title at any time?
I think they're on their way back, but this is a big year for them because they got a senior quarterback. They've got some seniors on defense. Their defense is really stout. They tackle very well, except for their first game against Cedar Grove, Georgia. They have really played well down the last 3 weeks. But with a senior quarterback, I think they've got a shot. Are they ready to beat, the Dutch Forks of the world or the Sumters? Not quite sure. They'll have a tough game with Berkeley, and they'll have a tough game with Fort Dorchester. And other than that, their schedule's set up pretty good. So we'll see how they develop over the course of the next 7-8 weeks.
I know we like to talk about Belton Honeypath and how far they've come, but they ran into a bit of a buzzsaw with T.L. Hanna, and again, it's a very easy thing to do with how strong they are. How do they keep themselves motivated going forward?
Oh, they're going to be fine. They're Belton Honeypath. They don't go undefeated every year because they play a tough schedule. Hanna is obviously a very good 5A opponent. It's going to make them better. They'll lick their wounds. Russell Blackston doesn't, as the head coach, he doesn't let a lot of that stuff bother him. They'll lose. They could lose another game going forward. But what you're going to know is probably in November they're going to be playing well and they're going to be a threat in the upper state.
You rarely see, when I'm looking at a high school scoreboard, that South Point loses a football game. How strong is Clover?
Clover with Brian Lane is they're coming around. They're he's, for so many years they were that wing T offense, run, and Brian has come in there and brought the spread to Clover. It took them a little bit of time last year. They won their first 3 games last year and then got up some injuries and didn't win another game. So this was a statement game for them. I think they're much better than they've been in several years. They play in a pretty competitive conference. It's going to be a lot of fun to watch to see,
if they can continue that role, because because over the years they've just been up one week, down the next. But Brian seems to have readied and steadied that ship.
I want to look at kind of what some of these schools are doing weather-wise, at least to prepare for this week, David. But first, I do want to at least circle one game on the schedule just because they are coming off a bye. Burns heading to Spartanburg. That one, I think, at least has some people salivating in the upper state there.
Yeah, just the fans of both teams are going to be so excited. It's a great rivalry. Burns is probably playing a little better right now than Spartanburg. And Spartanburg really needs to, this would be a huge win for them. So it's an early game, but it's a big game. I mean, anytime these two get together, this could end up being the difference in one of them making the playoffs and one of them not, because that's a very good conference. So you'll see both teams get after each other pretty good on Friday night.
All right, what are you hearing, at least in the Low Country, about games being moved, and obviously with the weather being what it will be over the course of the next couple of days? What are you seeing, at least across your eyes?
Well, there have been some that have just flat out canceled, said we're not playing. There'll be no games on Friday night. The difference is maybe they try to get together on Monday or maybe Tuesday and play a Tuesday, Saturday week and then get back on schedule. I know that down here, Friday night was supposed to be Fort Dorchester and Berkeley, which, I've been touting as the game of the year for 6 months. And so it's not going to happen, but I know that both schools want to try to play. It's not a conference game, but it's a big game because they're both top 10 teams and probably the two best teams along with Somerville in the area. So we'll see where they get together, maybe Monday or Tuesday and play. If they don't play it by Tuesday, they won't play the game, I'm pretty sure, unless the high school league steps in and extends it a week. They won't play unless they can get it in.
I said we do have some, unfortunately, some experience with this from 2 years ago. Do you see that the high school league may be stepping in and just kind of banging the whole week and moving things back?
I think that's a possibility, and I think a lot of people are pushing for that. But a lot of the schools affected right now this week, it's not a region game. So it's not imperative that you play the game in order to make the playoffs. The difference a couple of years ago in October was everybody was in their region schedule. And, when you base your playoffs off the top four finishers, but you're missing games, it's really not fair. So that's where they stepped in. I did not get the feeling as of today they were going to step in and do this. They were going to leave it up to the schools to figure it out. Unless it was a conference type game, then they would try to help. But that could change. It kind of depends on the path of this storm. I know Horry County and probably the PD area is probably going to get quite a bit of rain. I think down in the Low Country, it's kind of backed off in their projections. So we'll see where it goes.
Well, the one thing is, the thing you have to be concerned about is the mandatory evacuation on the coast, and obviously with the reversals of I-26, it's going to be a situation where you're not going to be able to go to games at all. In that regard, it just seems like just the travel for that is going to be treacherous enough from that standpoint. But we'll see how it plays itself out, whether or not we actually have a Friday night high school situation this upcoming week. But there's no other definitive movement of games. You haven't heard anybody make any announcements as far as whether or not they're going to move and play, say, Wednesday or something like that?
Haven't seen anything that late. Like I said, I think they're waiting to kind of see when they can get back on the practice field. If maybe down in this area it doesn't hit maybe only an inch or two of rain and they can clear them to practice on Saturday and Sunday, a lot of them will play Monday.
Right.
I know a couple of matchups have been just canceled. I think First Baptist and Cardinal Newman pretty much canceled their Skeezer game. Another Skeezer game that was real important is Porter and Lawrence Manning, and right now they're not set to play.
David Shelton, Charleston Post and Courier, stay dry and stay safe, my friend.
Okay, thanks, guys.
That's David Shelton. Again, we'll give you as many of those changes and postponements as we get them here on Sports Talk. We'll come back and switch our attention to the National Football League, the league where they play for pay. The Carolina Panthers are 1-0. We talk to their radio voice, Mick Mixon. We come back here on Sports Talk.
stand-up tight end to the right. The fake to McCaffrey. Newton's going to take it himself. Carolina leads. Touchdown. Cam Newton from 4 yards away.
We now bring in the voice of the Carolina Panthers, Mick Mixon, after the Panthers start out 1-0 after a victory over the Dallas Cowboys. It's funny, Mick, I was flying back from the Clemson, Texas A&M game when I flew into the Charlotte airport, and I was driving on I-77 listening to your call on the Carolina Panther flagship. While the game was still going on, I saw a lot of cars that had stars on them and star car flags going south on 77 with some really ticked off Cowboy fans who left early.
That's exactly what we want. And Dallas has got the pedigree. They've been successful. They've got the star, the cheerleaders. They've got that thing with the flamboyant owner and all that. But yesterday was the Carolina Panthers day. The Panthers were the better football team. I think Carolina won special teams, which was big, and then stoned them on defense. Dallas is a rhythm team. You know, they want to get that zone stretch cut back, then the boots and the naked, the counters with Prescott getting out on the edge off of that. And the Panthers never let them get into a rhythm because of the sacks, the minus yardage plays, and some penalties on Dallas.
Yeah, but I'm not trying to sit here and say that this was a lot of it was their own doing. A lot of it was Carolina's doing. It seemed like whatever was going on, just from watching the game on the plane and then listening to your call on the way home, it just seemed like you made them look really out of sorts.
Well, if defensive front can do that to you, and I'm thinking about the last couple of years, you know, the Panthers have had pretty salty front sevens for several years now under Ron Rivera, but what's been missing? It's been that continuity in the back end of the defense. Now, the Panthers did go to Super Bowl 50 with Kurt Coleman as one of the safeties and Josh Norman at a corner, but in the NFL, especially in the NFC South, you got to be able to run with slot receivers. You got to be sound in the back. And so I think the Panther coaches and fans, too, are very excited about Dante Jackson, very excited about Galden, excited about Denoris Searcy. Captain Munnerlin's playing well. He was one of the stars yesterday. So to have the strong secondary to complement the primary, it gives you hope moving forward.
Well, you know, we discussed this before the season started, Mick. And there goes my theory blown up that Cam Newton will not be running the football because I think he pulled it down 13 times. Is that something he discusses on the sideline with Norv Turner, or he has the ability to call his own number when he needs to?
A little bit of both, and you're not alone, my friend. A lot of people got faked out by that Norv Turner sleight of hand. Anybody who thought that Cam Newton was not going to run anymore in this Norv Turner offense, he may run less. He may not run at all against Dallas. He may run it 15, 20 times against Cincinnati. That's the beauty, I think, of this offense, is that it will morph, it will adapt, it will use what works game in and game out. But Newton is still a fantastic runner. I maintain that he's safer running than he is in the pocket, hoping the left tackle does his job. He can end the play on his own terms. He's facing most of the tacklers that are coming. He can see what's coming at him. He's not the best slider in the world, but he's 6'5", 6'6". He's got a long way to go to get to the ground, so he doesn't do it quite as well as Russell Wilson. But it adds another dimension to this Panther offense.
Mick, it's interesting looking at kind of the numbers, and just from my own analysis of the game and seeing it play out, it almost seems that this new scheme with Norv, it provides easier throws for him because, you know, the one thing that I've always been nitpicky about Cam Newton is his completion percentage. 17 to 26 is nothing to sneeze at, but when you look at the yards per attempt, it's only basically it's a little bit less, but because the yardage wasn't big, that tells me there's easier throws in the scheme for him than there were under the previous administration.
Makes sense. I'm with you. And then the higher degree of difficulty throws, Newton made those as well. He fit the ball into some very tight windows. Funchess, Jarius Wright come to mind. So I think there's a lot to like about this offense. It's got the weapons. There is concern, though, about injuries with Darrell Williams getting a shot to the knee yesterday, with Greg Olsen with the foot. Luke Kuechly could have he could have gingival recession, and it would panic Panther fans because of how universally loved he is, but I think he's going to be fine. And then Damiere Byrd. Have you guys heard anything on Damiere Byrd today?
We have not heard an update on that. I was hoping maybe you had that.
He rode the bike. I wish I knew more. I was at work all day and have been at the stadium since this morning, but just hard to dig out really any information on Monday because there's so much going on. But I think, I saw Damiere Byrd. He never went to the locker room when he got tweaked. He rode the bike for a while on the sideline, so hopefully he'll be okay. He's a great addition to the club again this year.
Of course, one that's very, very principal in the minds of folks here, obviously.
And Mick, I know it's very early, but everybody watches everybody else in one of the toughest division, if not the toughest division in the NFL. And of course, the Falcons lost on Thursday. But what Tampa did in New Orleans, did that shock a bunch of folk in your office?
Oh, my gosh. And we were watching it, glued to it yesterday while the Panther pregame show was on. And Ryan Fitzpatrick from out of Harvard, I mean, he played that intelligent, athletic game yesterday. How could that even happen? How could the Bucs go to New Orleans and make the Saints look like they've never practiced on defense? Drew Brees completes about 110% of his passes, almost brings the Saints back. I mean, this is incredible theater. It's one reason why the NFL is king. But in the NFC South, it's positioned right there. It's right there for the Panthers, especially if Carolina could get the job done at Atlanta to go up a couple games early in the division.
Well, here's my thing, Mick. I look at this and I see across the league, I see a real downturn in the first, I would say, 3 to 4 weeks of play, just because of the fact that the teams just basically punt on the preseason, because of the fact that it almost feels like the new preseason is the first 2 to 3 to 4 weeks of the regular season, because of the fact that teams just don't want to show anything. They don't want to get anybody hurt. And it seems that when you get to week 1 of the regular season, teams still aren't prepared.
I disagree with the premise of your question. I think that preseason football used to be like that, but I'm just thinking about who the Panthers faced. I'm thinking about Miami week 2. Miami ran a bunch of exotic blitzes. Miami ran some no huddle. They ran run pass options. They ran shifts, motions. I think preseason football has changed. Teams are so nervous about being flat when the regular season begins, and you cannot fall a lap down in the NFL the first quarter of the season, that I think teams are actually doing a little more, reaching a little deeper into their playbook.
Going into this matchup this week, obviously, rivalry game. Panthers are obviously on the schedule. How do you see the matchup?
Julio Jones, Mohamed Sanu, the backs come out of the backfield and catch the ball from Matt Ryan's hands. It's going to be very, very tough, but I think that Dante Jackson gives you hope. And I think the matchup of Bradbury on Julio Jones, I can't wait to see. That alone will be worth the price of a ticket or listening some on the Carolina Panthers radio network. But I think the Panthers can do it, so we'll see.
Who do you have on the show tonight?
Oh, good show. Thanks for asking. We got KK Short, we got Marty Herney, and we got Ron Rivera all on the show tonight.
Well, give them all our best and appreciate, as always, the visit on Monday. We'll talk to you next week.
My pleasure, guys. Thank you.
That's Mick Mixon, voice of the Panthers.
And, of course, the new owner seemed to be happy that his first regular season game was a W.
And you saw that they don't have the NFL shield at midfield anymore now. They put the Panther logo there, which was a big point of contention amongst the fan base.
Oh, yeah, I know it. Yeah. And I'm hearing more commercials. Hey, you know, we come from 2 different states, but we're one person on.
Yeah, well, yeah. Tomorrow is a Talking Tuesday. We will still have the reports from both Clemson and South Carolina. Still, maybe we'll look for more updates on exactly how those 2 programs will handle the weather this week, and also how high school programs across the state will do the same. Corn returns tomorrow from his Rosh Hashanah respite. And we will all be back here, 3 of us together, on a Tuesday edition of Sports Talk tomorrow. For Professor Tom Hayes, I'm Will Pelagic saying so long. Thanks for listening.